I never vanished. I was just working quietly, out of sight. And when I finally opened my mouth, the silence split the room like glass under pressure. 3 nights ago, I sat at my mother's dining table, just like I had more times than I could count. The setup looked more like a war room than a place to eat, everything polished to a mirror shine, utensils placed with military precision, smiles stretched tightly over tension. My father cleared his throat, that slow, stern kind of clearing that always came before he delivered a verdict. "We're concerned," he said. But it wasn't love behind his words. It was coated in disappointment, dressed up as care. I wore a basic gray sweater, pulled my hair back, skipped the makeup. It wasn't laziness, it was strategy. Let them assume I was barely hanging on. Across from me sat my brother Nathan, freshly appointed senior counsel. Harvard Law. Always looked like he was posing for a professional portrait. Every time I walked into a room, he straightened his back like I might scuff his image just by existing. Then there was Uncle Marcus. Ever since Grandma died, he'd tried to crown himself the new family patriarch. He gave me that same tired look, like I'd wandered on stage during someone else's performance and forgotten my lines. "You had promise," my mother said, gently swirling her wine like it was medicine. Director at 27, why throw all of that away? But I hadn't thrown anything away. I'd been building something far too big to be squeezed into their safe little dinner conversations. Still, I kept my silence. For now. My phone lay screen down beside my plate. 6:58 p.m. 2 minutes to go. Nathan leaned toward me with a kind of brotherly concern that never rang true. "Ellie, you don't have to prove anything. I could talk to the partners at my firm. Get you into something secure. Something steady. You're too smart to just drift." Steady. That's all they ever wanted for me. A steady job. A simple title. A neat box they could show off. Last Christmas, he'd called my startup a cute side project. Like I was fiddling with toys while the rest of them erected skyscrapers. None of them knew I'd been grinding through 18-hour days, writing code through headaches, negotiating government contracts over frozen Zoom calls from my unheated apartment, and closing deals I still wasn't legally allowed to talk about. For half a year, they kept forwarding me job postings. My mom even sent me a book, Finding Your Spark, with a post-it note on the cover. This helped me when I felt lost. It could have been sweet, if it hadn't been so incredibly patronizing. 6:59 p.m. 1 minute left. I took a long breath, looked around the table, and said, "Would you like to hear what I've been building?" My mother straightened up. There was a flicker of something in her eyes, hope, maybe, that I was finally giving up the chase, heading back to corporate, returning to a path she could talk about with pride. Instead, I smiled and said, "I think Forbes said it better." Just then, her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at the screen and froze. The glass in her hand trembled ever so slightly. Nova Shield now valued at $5.8 billion. Founder Eleanor Keeney breaks stealth. My photo sat just above the headline. What followed wasn't silence, it was shock that cracked through the air like thunder. Nathan leaned closer, voice barely audible. 5 billion. Like the number physically couldn't belong in the same universe as me. Uncle Marcus grabbed the phone from the table, eyes darting like he was searching for a flaw in the image. "No way. This has to be fake." "It's not," I said calmly. "And that number? Already old news. After this morning's defense contract was finalized, the valuation's closer to 7. My father slowly leaned back in his chair, blinking as though trying to bring this new version of me into focus. "Why didn't you ever mention this?" he asked. I looked him in the eye. Because no one thought to ask. They'd all been too busy mourning the person they expected me to be to recognize the woman I'd already become. I reached for my tablet and turned the screen toward them. A live video feed came into view. Nova Shield's headquarters, 40 stories of sleek glass and steel. Engineers moved across workstations. The command center pulsed with activity. You assumed I was working out of a spare closet. That's not a closet. That's my tower. I bought the building last year. Outright. No financing. Suddenly, my mother's phone began buzzing over and over. CNBC. Bloomberg. TechCrunch. all reporting the same name, mine. Uncle Marcus narrowed his eyes at the feed. You have government clearance? I nodded. Oracle. Titan Ventures. The Department of Defense. We kept it under wraps for national security reasons. Nathan still hadn't closed his mouth. But that old car. The tiny apartment. You wore that same coat 3 years in a row. Why live like that? I smiled. Because I don't need expensive things to feel powerful. I didn't need to wear my success. I just needed to build it. Quietly. So it would speak for itself. I stood, tugged the hem of my gray sweater, the same one they'd all assumed was a symbol of failure. While you were working on how to rescue me, I was designing something bigger than all of us. Something you'll spend years trying to understand. Outside, my car was waiting. Not a limousine, just Lena, my CEO. She was behind the wheel, as always. My second in command. My constant. As I slid into the passenger seat, my phone vibrated. Stock up 35%. CNN interview in 30 minutes. That night, I stood under the glare of studio lights, camera trained on my face, live on air. I spoke about Nova Shield. I talked about the late nights, the isolation, the spiral of doubt, the moments I almost gave up, and the ones when I didn't. And I ended with this. If they tell you your dream is too weird, too slow, too small, listen. Then build it anyway. Quietly. Alone if you must. Layer by layer. Until one day, it roars loud enough to drown out every doubt they ever tried to place on you.